welcome back to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast, year-round podcast focused solely on all things fantasy football from the blue-collar point of view. It is, what's the date today, Tom?
27 or 28.
Okay. Good job, Tom.
27.
It's in May, at some point in May, and it's Friday, so go figure out the date yourself, apparently. I am your host, DJ, as usual, a little confused. Not as confused as my friend Tom over here, who is back, by the way. I'm here with my fellow blue-collar ballers, Tom and Sean. Three musketeers are at it again, all assembled. Who's the fourth man?
Andrew.
No, that's Keenan. He's our, not our photographer. He's our, what are you doing over there? He's
Cameraman.
Cameraman.
Cameraman. Yeah.
You know, it's a lot easier when there's just two of us. I feel like when there's three of us, there's too much idiocy in the room, and it just goes downhill from there. But anyway, today we're talking 13 through 24, the second half, part two of our running back rankings, or Fantasy Pros running back rankings, and then we tell you guys where we have them ranked, and it's kind of fun. We like doing it because we like to talk about fantasy football. But before we do that, let's talk top 5 news with John Cerruti.
Okay, top 5 news. Free agent Tajay Sharp signs a 1-year deal with the Atlanta Falcons.
Let's just remember that for news that we'll likely, I'm assuming, discuss later on. So just plant that one in the back of your heads, listeners, and we'll bring it up in just a few minutes.
Correct. Number 4, running back Jeff Wilson Jr. for the San Francisco 49ers will start the 2021 season on the PUP list. Wilson tore his meniscus during a weightlifting session. What are your thoughts on this?
Wait, isn't your meniscus in like your leg?
No, your knee.
Your knee. Oh, so it must have been leg day, I'm assuming?
It was probably squats.
Must have been leg day. San Francisco 49er running back got hurt. Is that really news?
No, they have 14 more to back them up.
They have 14 more 180-pound running backs, and they'll go through probably 12 and a half of them. This does spin out the herd a little bit, though, for guys like Trey Sermon, Raheem Mostert, who I still believe is the best running back they have. Inevitably, he will get hurt. I hate to say that, but I still think Raheem Mostert's the best back they have. What do you guys think?
Talented-wise, yes, until I see Trey Sermon, but he's a rookie.
But they signed some
Wayne Gallman.
Yep, the Gallman. And they have the kid that Spot started a couple times for him last year, Michael Hasty. So they still got a number of running backs on the squad there, and that's what they like to do. They throw guys out there, the hot hand will get the work until they get hurt, and then they find another hot hand, rinse and repeat. That's why you don't really want to own too many guys. You take a Trey Sermon, I think maybe a Raheem Mostert at this point, Tom, in the later rounds, and hope that maybe they
unless people fall in love with Mostert early again, like they did last year.
Yeah.
5th, 6th round pick.
Let them.
I think Sermon's the better back.
And then you get Sermon later on. Yeah.
But let's also forget that the implication here is going to be Trey Lance when he starts, which will be week 1.
He's going to run a lot more than Jimmy ever will.
Yep, and that will take away part of their workload. So
I think Garoppolo gets traded, but that's another story for another day. What's next on the list, John?
Number 3, New York Giants running back Saquon Barkley might not handle a full workload early in the season, according to ESPN.
I don't want to use the BS phrase and say that out loud, but that's pretty much what I think when I hear this. And even so, Saquon Barkley with 12 to 15 carries is just as good as any back in the league. So.
Yeah, he's not going to get 25 carries. That's why they've signed all these Corey Clements of the world. They give him workload early in the year. Like week 5 or 6, Barkley should be back to where he was 2 years ago.
He'll get all the goal line work. He'll get all the passing work. Like I said, even 12 to 15 carries can net you. He's almost like McCaffrey. It can net you, 20-plus fantasy points in PPR.
ESPN did say that, but Barkley himself stated that he is 100%. He is ready to handle a full workload. So
you know what they call that one right there? Fake news. That's what they call it.
So we'll go on to number 2. Adam Schefter of ESPN reports free agent Todd Gurley is visiting the Lions on Thursday.
This is more fake news. So visiting typically means signing. That's typically how that goes. Very rarely or seldom do you see a player visit a team later on when free agency is over with and not sign with them. So interesting that he also was a Georgia product, much like Deandre Swift, but I don't see him being a concern for Deandre Swift. And frankly, I would still expect Jamal Williams to be the
Oh yeah, he'd be the
second
third
guy.
back at best.
He was trash. I mean, he was dust last
They
year.
want to probably look at his knees, see how athletic they are still right now.
Yeah.
They didn't get any better from 2 years ago.
But he was just not. I mean, he was just completely a different player last year. So, I think he's. I hate to say it, the guy that was an MVP candidate for the NFL one year, once upon a time. At this point, just a depth at, I think.
Yeah, I think Todd Gurley, if anything, will just play second or third field.
Might not even make the team.
He might not. It's all it is a visit.
Although you said, not to cut you off, but you said Gurley was putting some stuff out on social media.
Yeah, actually not just him. The person he's training with and on social media, it's been himself and Ezekiel Elliott training together. Elliott stated that Gurley is ready to go and that he should start because he looks explosive more than ever. The knee is fine, but it's what the coaches see and what they hear. So he may enter a spot, maybe not here, but definitely on another team at some point.
And if this was Matt Patricia coaching this team, I would get worried that he would use an old, busted running back more than the actual best one on the team. But thankfully he's gone. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Okay, so number one news, Atlanta Falcons wide receiver Julio Jones could be traded as early as next week for Diana Russini of ESPN. So far, Julio's been linked to these following teams: the 49ers, the Patriots, the Titans, and the Colts.
So that means he will go to the Chargers, which would be a great fit, by the way. But yeah, it looks like he's going. There's some shenanigans there. There was Shannon Sharp's show, and we touched on this a little bit in the last show, John. But there was some speculation whether or not Julio knew that he was on the air when he divulged this information. And then, of course, as we mentioned, Tajay Sharp gets signed. Now, that's not a Julio replacement necessarily, Tom, but it's a guy to add to the depth chart
Just in case.
in preparation. Sounds like they're shopping, and they're not disputing any of this news. So, I guess what I'll ask you guys is, what do you think the best landing spot would be? Mine is the team I just said, the team that added a ton to their offensive line, the team that already has Keenan Allen, an up-and-coming quarterback, and Justin Herbert. I think the Chargers would not only be an excellent team for him to land on, but they would be a Super Bowl contender, I think. Tom, what about
I've
you?
heard that he wants to go to the Patriots, but I saw a picture with him and Hopkins online. Arizona's not one of those teams, but they can get right in that sweepstakes. Arizona's that team that needs that second guy.
So you like Arizona, and I don't dislike that because you guys know I was hoping that they would sign another big-time wide receiver to their squad, and I assume they're in pretty good shape cap-wise. I mean, they've got a quarterback on a rookie contract. That's always a good thing for the cap. What do you think, John? Who would you like to see him go to? And by the way, the Patriots, I'm not trying to be rude, but he wants to go to a winning team. This is a team that didn't even have a winning record last year. And they've got, I think Bill Belichick would tell you, they've got a ways to go before they're contending. So I don't know that would be a good fit for him. But anyway, John, what do you think?
I mean, I'm a Pats guy. I would love to see him go there, but I don't think.
Not if you're on him on your fantasy team.
Yeah, I think Chicago would be an upgrade for him. I'd like to see him go there, give Justin Fields another weapon, and actually help Allen Robinson as well. I think it'd be a good fit there, because other than Cole Kmet and Allen Robinson, Mooney's up and coming, but I think he can still survive there. He doesn't need that role he's had in Atlanta, which is a PPR monster, but he would definitely help move the chains here and take some pressure off the other guys.
Well, he's not just a PPR monster. He's a guy that will get you a ton of yards after the catch. He's a guy that can be a deep threat. He just doesn't catch a lot of touchdowns for whatever reason. And maybe that changes with a different quarterback, but I think that's a great landing spot too. So we're each talking teams that there's already an established, really good wide receiver on there, and the reason I'll say for my sake that we're saying that is because Julio's so damn good and makes the offense is so much better that there's going to be enough to go around, and he's going to be able to support a workload for himself just by getting open and being as good as he is. I mean, all the other receivers and all the other players in the league say he's the best receiver in the league still at 31, 32.
Imagine if he went to Kansas City.
They were looking for a number 2, but then you're talking he's the third option on that.
Yeah.
Oh, Kelsey and Hill take most of
But
the
I
stuff.
think the biggest thing
So for me, from a fantasy standpoint, as good as Mahomes is, I'd almost rather, that's why I think San Diego's just a great spot. And they got a great line too, which
Yeah.
really helps. And Austin Eckler, an excellent running back. All right, that's it, huh?
That's it for news.
All right, let's get to the second half of our top 24, as according to Fantasy Pros, at the running back position. We're going to start with number 13. He is a guy that I actually had ranked in our top 12. I had him ranked at 11, and that's Deandre Swift. I've said it before, Adrian Peterson inexplicably saw 174 touches to DeAndre's 171, if you can believe that. Peterson rewarded dumb Matt Patricia, whatever his stupid idiot name is, with 3.9 yards per carry and 5.6 yards per target. Meanwhile, Swift provided 4.6 yards per carry and 6.2 yards per target. Not to mention, Swift had 10 total touchdowns, even though he received just 28% of the red zone carries. Trash bag Peterson, on the other hand, saw over 50% of those red zone carries and finished with just 7 touchdowns. Thankfully, both Patricia and Peterson are both gone, guys. Enter Dan Campbell, who in 2015 coached Lamar Miller, who had 241 touches and an RB6 finish in 2015. And if you dig a little deeper, you'll find, if you take out the games that Joe Philbin was the head coach that year, you see a 16-game pace of 266.8 PPR points for Miller, which would have made him the RB2. So I get that Jamal Williams is an asset and that he will get usage. And make no mistake about it, he will. He won't get the usage or the share of the workload that Peterson got. I'm confident and I'm convinced of that. Swift, on the other hand, will get a similar piece of the pie to what Aaron Jones, I think, got in Green Bay. And I think Williams will see a similar role behind Swift that he did behind Jones in Green Bay. Moving on to the quarterback, Jared Goff actually targets his running backs generally less than Matt Stafford, but Goff had Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks. This year he has Amon-Ra St. Brown, a rookie, Rashad Perriman, a bust, Tyrell Williams, a guy, and Geronimo Allison, another guy. So expect him to check down a lot, I think, to Swift, who may be his best receiving option, Tom.
It's either him or Hawkinson up there. And Quintez Cephas was a rookie last year as well. They like him, but it's Swift show up in Detroit.
Where'd you have him ranked on?
I am at 12.
You have him at 12. I had him at 11. Where'd you have him?
I guess I drank a lot of Kool-Aid here at 9.
I mean, I get it.
And the biggest reason for me is, was you break down that stat, not just on this show, but the previous show where you said Dan Campbell coached Lamar Miller, look at his workload, look where he finished. Now you tie in the targets that are lost on that team by these receivers. It's quite a bit, guys. It's like almost 200 targets you had last year. I mean, Peterson only saw 18 targets out of the backfield. Amendola 69 gone. Marvin Hall 30. Sanuda's gone 23. Marvin Jones gone 115. Kenny Golladay 32. So he stands a good chance to see, like you said, a lot of check down here, especially with Goff here. So I think he's primed for maybe possibly a top 5 season here. It's going to be how good that line is, but he's safe either way. These guys are getting blown out. He's going to be you know what I'm saying, using the pass game lot, check downs and everything. So even if they get behind, he is actually a safe running back in PPR, and that's why I ranked him so high. I just don't think he's getting the credit he deserves as well.
He's one of those guys, and I mentioned it on the last show, Tom, that you could see ending up in that top 5 range. You could see it happening one way or another. You know, there's certain guys that I don't see that happening with. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, you know, J.K. Dobbins, just because of certain restrictions on them. But I think Swift you could see.
James Robinson last year for Jacksonville, he got a lot of the offense because their offense was poor. I could see the same thing in Detroit this year with Swift.
No doubt. Anything else you guys want to touch on with DeAndre Swift?
No.
All right, let's move on to Fantasy Pros number 14th ranked running back, and that is Antonio Gibson, who I have ranked at 15th. And on the last show, I mentioned J.D. McKissick's 110 targets. And here's where we talk about regression. McKissick had never seen more than 49 targets prior to last year. Why? Alex Smith, Taylor Heineke, Kyle Allen, that's why. The check down Charlies of Washington last year. Ryan Fitzpatrick, on the other hand, does not check down. And I think that means McKissick's going to be required on the field a lot less in 2021, which in turn means that Gibson's going to be required a lot more, and for good reason. He only saw 405 snaps and finished as the RB13 with 11 touchdowns. To put that into perspective, guys, Miles Sanders saw 602 snaps and finished as the RB23. Kenyon Drake saw 615 snaps, finished as the RB16. Mike Davis saw 579 snaps, finished as the RB12. Now let's shift a little bit, shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk King Henry, the dominant Derrick Henry. He had 333 points on 705 touches. That's 0.47 points per touch. Gibson, 202 points on 405 touches. That's 0.49 per touch. The narrative overall is touchdown regression, but maybe Gibson's just really good. I think the work's going to be there. You're talking about more points per touch than Derrick Henry. I'm in on that. I think you go get you some A-Gib in 2021. I'm really excited about it. John?
Yeah, Antonio Gibson, for me, another one ranked higher than I think you guys. I'm ranked at 10th. Antonio Gibson started getting sprinkled in a lot more at the end. Let's not forget, he was a rookie last year. No, OTAs, no training here. We all know why. But he started to look really great at the end of the season. That's even sharing a workload with
McKissick. No OTAs last year.
Yeah, no OTAs last year. But I don't see McKissick getting those targets again. It's not going to happen. I know they didn't want to rush Gibson, so I think Gibson, he just goes, and he didn't get a full workload here in most of these games, but, the biggest carries he ever had all season was 2 games, 20, and then a couple times 19 and 16, but if he sees this constant workload of 15 to 20 plus in the passing game, he's gonna go off this year. And Rivera likes to use the running backs. We know that. He did in Carolina, and he's got it here, and he has other weapons that are going to help Gibson here. And they've also made some improvements on this line. Ryan Fitzpatrick should open up this passing game, which helps Gibson out. They won't stack the box, so I think Gibson is primed for a great year.
And Tom Gibson's a pass catcher. It's almost 230 pounds. You don't see that too often. That's an elite, not elite, but a guy that can be a third down back. Where do you have him?
I'm at 11.
Oh,
he had no touches in college, which helps him out. He had minimal touches.
Yeah, you were
last
nervous
year.
about it.
There was no film on him. I don't like to rank guys I've never seen before.
Right, yeah.
And I saw him last year. He played really hard. He ran the ball tough between the lines. That's what I like in a running back. That's why I'm the top at 11.
Awesome.
And he's not a small guy either. He's 6 foot 228. I know some people when they think Gibson, he's like 5'10" or like 205. No, he's 6.
No, he's almost 230.
Yeah,
he's a big.
He's a big back.
He's in McCaffrey's what, like 215.
I don't even think he's anywhere like 212.
Yeah. Well, but he's in great shape. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. So cool. And interesting to see we're all high on him. I'm actually surprised that I'm the low man on Gibson. To be honest with you, I went out and got him in our keeper league because I'm that excited about him, and I knew there were going to be a ton of running backs available after all the keepers were set. So he was somebody I intentionally sought after. So moving on to number 15. 15, according to Fantasy Pros, is Najee Harris. I have him at 16. I was surprised to see how ambitious Fantasy Pros was on a rookie, but I still love this guy. And I've heard that there's a lot of concern around the Steelers' offensive line. They ranked 17th at the end of 2020, so they weren't horrible. I get the loss of Pouncey is pretty huge. It's a huge loss. But there are worse lines in the league. And like we talked about on the last episode, Zeke Elliott finished in the top 10 with the league's 5th worst offensive line. I can see Harris as a similar prospect to Elliott, and if this line is even a little bit better than we expect, Harris could easily finish much higher than where I have it ranked. Pittsburgh didn't have a great offense last year, so that's notable. But they were 22nd in passing yards per game. If you look at their running game, that was atrocious. And opposing teams never had to worry about putting 8 in the box. I think they had the worst rushing offense in the league. Yeah, they finished dead last in rushing yards per game. Najee Harris changes that. He changes the landscape. The O-line could certainly hold him back, but I expect him to do just fine in his rookie season, though.
Oh, I agree. I'm at 16 as well. He hasn't never played 17 games in a season. That's the only downfall. Early in the season, he might blow up.
Well, they
play
never
really
had
well.
seven. Well,
Well, and even in college, they had 10 to 12 games.
Right.
He might regress at the end of the season, but
And you typically see some wear on rookies down the stretch.
and Pittsburgh's enough backs where they can bring in a couple other ones. I'd have him higher if he's the only back on the team, but they still have 3 on the back.
I'd have him higher if the line was better. The backs I'm not worried about, because this team, John, said, we're getting this guy in the first round. And when you get a team that takes a running back in the first round, that just doesn't really happen anymore. I think that tells the story.
Yeah, here's the thing about Najee Harrison, I'm gonna myth bust you. He might not have played 17, but he did play 15 his sophomore year at Alabama. I know the games with playoffs and all that championship, like 13. So he's played 13 in the last few years.
Well, technically Tom's still right, because he didn't play 17.
Yeah.
And
Like
at
I said-
Alabama, they have 4 running backs that are all first round, great type of guys.
Yeah.
They don't get a ton of snaps.
Right.
Yeah, I get it, but Harris is, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, he doesn't have any metrics on him, I get it. He missed his pro day, but here's.
Well, yeah, he didn't test anywhere.
Yeah,
But he didn't need to.
You don't need to. If you saw a
Right.
video of this guy, it
Yeah.
just has the agility, the speed, the size. He's 6'1", 232 pounds, but.
Like, did Trevor Lawrence need a pro day? Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't think he's a prospect on the same level at the running back position that Trevor Lawrence is at the quarterback position, but I put this guy in the same category as the Saquon Barkleys and the Ezekiel Elliott's coming out of college.
I have Harris ranked 14.
Do you agree with that?
What?
That he's a prospect on that level with those guys?
Yes.
Do you agree
A
with
little
that?
below them. I think Barkley.
So between Jonathan Taylor and them?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, he literally hurdled the guy last year, and that guy was literally almost
Dead.
five.
He killed him.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, he literally hurdled this guy, and he was like almost standing up. And so that's like, what, 4 or 5 feet in the air, and he was diving for him. but
I don't know
still-
if you, so for guys like us, normal human beings can't do that. Super athletes like guys that play in the
Yes,
NFL.
but Najee Harris has the talent, and I think he's gonna be great here. He may not
Yeah.
see your 20 carries for 180 yards, but he'll probably give you like 22 carries, possibly 80 to 100 yards a game, depending on the matchup. But he's definitely gonna see target work. He did catch just between his last 2 years, 92 targets, and his target share his senior year was 13.4. He actually had 57 targets, 43 receptions for 425 receiving yards. He reminds me, in a way, of a bigger sized Le'Veon Bell. He's just got good cuts. He's very powerful. I think he'll see a lot of goal line touches here. That's why I kind of ranked him higher. And Big Ben having the passing game here should open up the lanes for him as well.
We're all big, we've been on the same page so far with
Yes.
the second half of the top 24 here. So with that being said, we'll move on to the next guy on the list. At number 16 on Fantasy Pros rankings, and just a reminder, these are PPR rankings. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I have CDH at 17. And all I gotta say about Clyde Edwards-Helaire is, post-hype sleeper anyone? Because I'll admit, I was super high on this guy, the CEH hype train last year, if you will. Probably too high. I would argue that I was the conductor on that train. I saw the bright lights of Kansas City, and they blinded me. And I forgot that landing spot isn't everything, and that CEH isn't necessarily a top-tier talent. But he isn't all that bad either. And he started the season last year with almost 16 PPR points per game in his first 5 games, and then fell apart a little bit with 11.5 in his last 7 games. Honestly, though, Helaire had just 3 single-digit PPR performances in his 13 games as a rookie. That's pretty good. And he averaged 13.5 on the season, all the while finishing 25th in red zone carries. Zach Moss, Darrell Henderson, and Cam frickin' Newton had more red zone carries than the Fresh Prince did. That should change this year, considering Damian Williams left for Chicago. The Hilaire's competition is Jerick McKinnon, Darwin Thompson, guys like that. Honestly, I think Helaire was a victim of great expectations last year, Tom, that he was never going to meet. In 2021, however, I think he might exceed him.
I got him at 24. I just don't trust them. I don't trust Kansas City running backs. They throw the ball a ton. They get those quick plays where they go down the field. One catch, they go 70 yards and a touchdown.
But you have people like Damian Williams that get targeted out of the backfield that can explode with this Kansas City offense.
I think Helaire can too, honestly.
Here's the thing. I actually agree with DJ on this one. I think he is a post-hype sleeper. I think people are.
Just to clarify, to respond to Tom, I don't have him aggressively ranked here.
I do.
I have him below consensus ranking. And John, you can touch on it in a sec where you've got him ranked. I don't think he's going to be excellent. I think he's going to be more in line with what his expectations are. So I think you would agree they were
16 and 24. You would put them in any order. They're all the same guys right now.
And I think you of all people would agree his expectations were unfair.
Oh, yeah, he was top 5 running back last year from college. I didn't trust him.
I got him at 16, right where Fantasy Pros has him, but I do like his upside this year because last year he was taken very early in most drafts. This year he will come in a bargain, but look at his competition, like you said, Jarek McKinnon, Darrell Williams, Darwin.
It always sounds like you're saying jerk McKinnon.
Jarek.
Like he's a jerk.
Jarek.
I just think it's
Jarek. I say Jarek, actually. McKinnon, Darrell Williams, Darwin Thompson, D. Gore, and Elijah McGuire. There is no competition here. I think the lack of training camp last year, the lack of probably knowing the playbook as he should, and the line that was not great. Line is
just
upgraded.
unfair expectations,
Yeah,
man.
I think that he will.
We were asking a guy with the talent level of a Damian Williams to come in and be a top 5 back. He wasn't Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's a superb, can't miss talent, prospect type of guy. Hilaire had skills, but he's not that guy. And I got, like I said, blinded by the bright lights of Kansas City, and I think a lot of other people did. So if we look at him, John, I think what you're saying too is, in a more reasonable light, with more reasonable expectations, he's going to be a good grab. And I think he's going to be a solid RB.
Yeah, he also doesn't have that competition around him.
Okay, where'd you have him ranked?
16.
Okay, so that's not two. That's one ahead of me.
Yeah, so I think the upgrade with the offensive line, basically the line has way improved compared to last year, and then no competition. I think he's primed for a good season, not a great season, a good season.
So moving on to 17 Fantasy Pros rankings. This one I don't get, guys. I don't understand why they've got him ranked. I mean, it's only a few lower than me, but that's Miles Sanders. I've got Miles Sanders up at 14. And there are a lot of players on this list that I could see becoming top 5 backs in 2021. We talked about Swift, we talked about Gibson. Sanders is one of the few that I don't see with that upside, but I do see him as a high-end RB2. And with an ADP of 30, I think that works out just fine with me. I'm not too worried about Kerryon Johnson, Boston Scott, or Kenneth Gainwell, but their combined efforts will eat into Sanders' workload, but not really enough to scare me, right now at least. Sanders saw 18 touches a game in 2020, which is right around what I expect from him this year. There's some concern that he got a lot of yards on an 82-yard rush, which I find ridiculous and irrelevant. He still managed that rush. I mean, he did.
Sanders was like that back in the day, too.
Exactly. Sanders ranked 3rd in snap share, 7th in routes run, and 21st in carries. Carry count's a little lower than we'd like, but again, he missed 4 games. The workload is there. His yardage per touch are solid. He ranked 8th there. But his efficiency otherwise didn't really jump off the page for me. I just don't see a lot that makes me think he's a potential league winner. He's a solid asset, I think, Tom, with a solid floor. I just don't see the ceiling.
Oh, I agree. Between 15 and 17. I have him at 17. He's just one of those guys. I think it's going to be the same situation was last year in Arizona, where Jalen Hurts is going to be Kyler Murray. He's going to be the Drake was last year. Like 900 yards, 10 touchdowns. What are you going to see from him this year?
Yeah, and you'd be happy with that. What do you got him ranked at?
I got him ranked at 17.
So I'm the high man on Sanders.
But here's the thing about Sanders. Let's not forget last season, he did get hurt. Wasn't 100% he wasn't 100% for a little bit in between games. But that's not what I'm trying to make for a point here. The point here is Peterson coached this team last year. It's a new head coach, and actually a bunch of a new offense coordinator. The whole team has basically just been revamped. If you look at last year's team, Peterson at one point the team, and everybody was just not sold. I mean, it started changing when Jalen Hurts came in. So I think we got a glimpse of what Miles Sanders can be with this new offense, but a new coach will definitely change this. Peterson drove this team into the ground, not only physically, but mentally, and a new coach should change all this. I think Sanders is going to be fine, but like you said, his ceiling is capped to a certain point. Plus, you add in Rieger's going to play more, and they also have Devontae Smith. But it should help them.
Dallas Goddard. Tom, the only guy that worries me a little bit is Kenny Gainwell taking some backfield catches out of the equation for Sanders.
Oh, I agree. Boston's going to get some of those garbage carries, middle of the game, middle of the second quarter, middle of the third quarter. But otherwise than that, it's his show. Gainwell's a decent back for him as a backup.
And Kerryon Johnson's just that guy on the bench that's surprised when they ask him to go into the game.
He's got to find his helmet.
He's got to find his helmet, yeah. Okay, next on the list for Fantasy Pros is J.K. Dobbins at 18. I've got Dobbins a little bit lower at 20. The good news is there's not another team in the NFL that runs the ball more than Baltimore, 34.6 times per game to be precise. That's actually down from over 36 per game in 2019. The bad news is 10 of those 34 per game go to Lamar Jackson, and 9 of them went to Gus Bus Edwards. The good news is Dobbins got most of the red zone carries at 28.16%. Even if Edwards and Jackson were right behind him, would be 27.18 and 25.42% respectively that they got. He still led the team in that category, nonetheless. More good news is that Mark Ingram, his 80 touches, headed to Houston. Let's just take half of those and give them to Dobbins, theoretically, factor them into what he got last year, and we're talking about 200 touches. I think we could see upwards of 250 touches as a ceiling for Dobbins in 2021. He only averaged about 1 targeted game in his final 9 games, so there's not much that leads you to believe he's going to be catching a ton of passes this year. Plus, Jackson only throws to his backs 15% of the time anyway. My concern for Dobbins is his 6 yards per attempt. I'm not sure he can keep that up. If he can keep it up and see a 250 carry ceiling that I suggested he could see, that's 1,500 yards. But if he regresses to, say, 5 yards per carry, that's still 1,250. But if he regresses to 5 and sees 200 attempts, that's 1,000 yards. Still not terrible, but not worth breaking the bank over, which I think a lot of people are willing to do this year. Dobbins also had 9 touchdowns on 158 attempts. That's a touchdown on every 17.5 attempts. To put that into perspective, Derrick Henry had a touchdown on every 22.2 attempts. That's the type of efficiency that I think would take 2 to 3 touchdowns away. I think if he sees a drop in that efficiency, which I expect him to. So he's not going to get the same touchdown totals that he would on a 16-game pace of what he would have had last year. This is all speculative, though. And while I expect a nice season for J.K., there seems to be an awful lot of hype attached to him. He's probably going to regress a bit in terms of efficiency. 250 carries, Tom, is probably too ambitious for a ceiling for him. So I would just cool it a little bit on Dobby. That's where I'm at with him right now.
I got him at 4.
Whoa! Yeah.
Are you smoking?
They
man?
were
You
5-0
got some
the
edibles
last
at the
5
house?
weeks of the season. He had almost 6 or 7 touchdowns the last 5 weeks of the season. This team played lights out when he was the lead back. Harbaugh does not. He's one of those guys that he's just going to feed him the ball.
But he doesn't do that.
He didn't have Mark Ingram in year 2 of his career, in year 8. This is a Mark Ingram that's faster and younger. And Mark Ingram had almost 15 touchdowns 2 years ago as the lead back.
John's chomping at the bit over here.
No. Is there a 1 in front of that 4?
No.
Wow. Okay, so
I
here's
mean, that's ambitious.
That's very ambitious. I'm not going to say that I don't think Dobbins has talent. I think he's very
So
talented.
you think he's going to be Ray Rice?
I think he's better than Ray Rice.
I think he's better,
He's
too.
more explosive than Rice
Yeah,
was.
but in terms of just productivity.
In that offense, he's Ray Rice, Mark Ingram combined.
Okay, I'll make my thoughts on Dobbins. Great player, great at Ohio State, great, even last year. It's the amount of attempts. The only way I see Dobbins going up to 4, like you're predicting, is a Gus Bus injury. And even then, why can't I think of
Because they do like Gus.
Justice Hill would get mixed into that afterwards. So here's the thing. He's never had more than 15 attempts all last season. The only good thing that came out of this is when Ingram was doing horrible, week 8 on, he basically saw double-digit carries, so that's the good thing. And the efficiency was there. And if you look at from week 8 on, when he started seeing double-digit carries, he only had 2 single-point PPR single games for PPR points. Everything else was double digits, including week 17 where he had 28 points. He doesn't need a lot. As long as he's seen low teens, like 10 to 12 attempts, he can see double digits here, but his ceiling is capped due to Gus Bus and also Justice Hill. And not so much Justice Hill right now, but if Gus Bus goes out, Justice Hill will be involved. Harbaugh likes to keep his backs fresh, so that's the thing. That's why he cycles them. Same plus with Lamar running the ball. Unless they revamp this offense, I'm not seeing Dobbins can have a successful season. But wow, 4.
I'll split the difference here, because I think there's two ways to look at J.K. Dobbins. I agree with John. My only big concern, my literally only big concern is he going to get the touches? I think they like Gus Edwards. Since Ray Rice, Tom, we have not seen a true beginning to end of the season workhorse back on this team. It's just not what Harbaugh does. On the other hand, if that does happen with Dobbins, yeah, he's got top 5.
Yeah, he's got top 5.
They're leading the league in rushing the last couple of years with a 1,000-yard quarterback and a 1,000-yard running back. Ingram is gone. He was a 1,000-yard running back 2 years ago with almost 15 touchdowns. You can almost insert Dobbin there to get those 15 touchdowns and 13 to 1,500 yards.
I can't wait to watch him because he is an exciting guy.
He is. No, he's a very explosive player, and he does. Like I said, he only needs those like 10 or probably like 12 to 15 touches. That's including rushes and the catching. But the thing is, like I think his ceiling's capped with Gus Bus. I mean, even if Gus Bus got hurt, even with Justice Hill. But here's the thing: the offensive passing coordinator is gone, but it's also Harbaugh coaching this team. Is very run heavy. But we don't know. They might have changed up things. They were last in passing yards last year, so that could change. He could actually be. You could be right. I could be totally wrong.
If he sees the Myles Gaskin or Miles Sanders workload, this is where I expect him at 20. If he sees the Zeke Elliott, Saquon Barkley workload, yeah, he's a top 5 guy. He's that talented, and he's that good of a fit on this offense. So it just matters. The big, like I said earlier, the big thing is, what does his workload look like? And we don't know until we start to see it. But if week 1 he comes out of the chute with a ton of carries, yeah, you're going to have top 5 upside from that guy. So we'll move on to the next guy on the list for Fantasy Pros at 19. I've got him. Okay, I cheated a little bit. I have I have two number 24 guys. I have 24A and 24B. Chris Carson is 24A for me. He's a little bit higher on Fantasy Pros. He's 19 on Fantasy Pros. My old friend Chris Carson. I don't have the drop right now because I think I'm warming up to him a little bit. I've been hard on this guy for a long time. And honestly, just when I started to like him around week 2 of last year, he started to break down. Chris Carson still had an okay year, but it was a year peppered with injuries, which really shouldn't surprise anyone. Remarkably, Carson is still just 26 years old, and Pete Carroll absolutely loves this guy, and so does Russell Wilson. Carroll doesn't, on the other hand, like Rashad Penny. Seattle didn't even pick up his 5th-year option. I'm not intimidated by DEEJAY Dallas or Travis Homer Simpson. Carson will get the work, and the dude is a gamer. And he'll miss games, too. He's one of the harder guys to project for me, but I think having him at 24 is more than safe. And it might even be unfair a little bit to Carson, especially considering, John, he's been a top 15 back 3 years straight in half PPR. So I might own quite a few shares in Carson this year.
Yeah, the biggest thing about Carson is that he's never played a full season at all. 2019 would have been the closest with 15 games.
But he's still giving you top 15.
Yeah, no. You take away his rookie season, which he got hurt. He, I believe, broke his leg that year, 4 games in.
Where do you have him ranked?
I have him ranked at 22.
I got him at 25.
So we're all
Yeah. But you're talking about a guy not including his rookie year. He's averaging 14.5 to 15.5 fantasy points per game. That's really good. But like DJ said, buyer beware, because you're probably not going to get a full season out of him. But he is efficient. So that's the one thing. Have a backup plan. What I mean by that is either draft this handcuff or possibly somebody that's going to give you the same production. But he does produce when he's healthy and on the field.
Tom, you have him at 25. Where would you draft a guy like Chris Carson? What round do you think?
7th round, 6th round, as my RB3. I wouldn't have him as a starter.
Yep, no, I agree with you. I think that's right about where you want to get him. He's a high-end RB3, low-end RB2 for me. If you have him as your RB3, you're in pretty good shape. But you got to expect that he's not going to play all he is. It's just the way it goes with him, unfortunately. but when he's out there, he'll do a good job for you. Moving on to number 20 for Fantasy Pros, he's my number 22 ranked running back, and that's David Montgomery. As I alluded to previously, Monty Burns made a season out of 6 games, basically. He averaged 25.7 PPR points per game in those final 6 games, as opposed to just 12.2 in his first 9. While a lot of analysts point to those final 6 games, where he faced run defenses like 32nd ranked Houston, 30th ranked Jacksonville, 27th ranked Minnesota, and 28th ranked Detroit, what they don't tell you is he scored over 25 twice in that span against 10th ranked Green Bay. As for his first 9 games, this is something they also don't tell you. Montgomery faced defenses like the 11th ranked Giants, run defense, 7th ranked Atlanta, 2nd ranked Indy, and number 1 ranked Tampa, and 4th ranked LA Rams, and still managed a double-digit PPR average in those 9 games with just 3 games in single digits. So why are we beating this guy up so much? I was guilty of it myself, but you have to look deeper, and you have to think predictively. That's where it gets a little dicey for Monty, as Chicago does face the 3rd toughest schedule in 2021 based on opponent winning percentage. But that's not the be-all, end-all. Strength of schedule in May doesn't always mean much. Let's remember that while Montgomery beat down some bad run defenses, Tom, he also held up against some pretty nasty ones. He didn't have Justin Fields.
I like that. I'm at 15. I still think he's going to be a 1,000-yard back, 8 to 10 touchdowns. He is the focal point of that offense with a young quarterback out there. Allen Robinson's going to get his touches, but he is, him and Robinson are the 2 guys on this offense.
Unless Julio goes.
Unless Julio goes there.
And Cole Kmet, your boy, Cole Kmet. Can't forget about him.
With Fields, it's a little bit dicey, but with Foles or Orton out there, it's a different story.
So Tom's got him a little higher than consensus. Where do you have Montgomery?
I have him at 24, which isn't awful. It's
No.
2 behind.
So we're a little behind, and Tom's a little ahead.
Yeah, but after you look at what you said, it kind of does eye-open
And
things.
nobody talks about the fact that he played okay.
Well, Tampa Bay was the
In
number
that first
1
half.
run defense last year.
Right.
And 18.9 points in that game. And guess what? He only had 10 carries. Here's the thing, guys. Last year's Chicago team was so horrible offensively and efficiency-wise. Fields should definitely open up this game. Yes, he may lose some attempts, but here's the thing. If you look at Montgomery's attempts, he doesn't see like a gigantic workload. Why? They were getting behind. Their defense got tired. They started giving up points. Now the team's throwing. Yes, he sees actually good healthy targets here. That's the good thing. But the bad thing is the rushes didn't start coming until mid-season, definitely in the last few games. But if this guy's getting 20 carries like he should, and they're staying competitive, the ceiling goes even higher. I didn't look at that way either, but then you look at all these games.
Nobody does.
Yeah, you see 10.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, 10, 12, 13, but guess what? He could get more than that.
Right.
Why? Because they didn't have a great quarterback. No, and that's the thing, is he could be more efficient. He was efficient against great defenses, so that's the thing. Even if he sees an uptick of 5 attempts from what his average was, and I'm not even counting the last 3 games, you're talking about 15 attempts. Now you throw in his targets anywhere from 5 to 6. He's got about 20 touches a game. He could actually go, I think I have him ranked too low. It's a little bit disrespectful after what you said.
Well, and Tom, he's a guy that I think in the draft, you see guys like him continue to drop because he's not sexy.
I think he's not exactly, he's not that sexy guy. He runs hard after the first hit, which people don't like to see. They like to see him just burst by guys, but he hits people and still gets a yard or 2 afterwards.
You could get him as an RB3, which would be fantastic.
And I believe, I don't know if I'm right about this, but I think I am. I believe his senior year in college, he had the most broken tackles.
He did.
138.
Which isn't the be-all, end-all stat.
I know.
It was at Iowa State, they're not the biggest.
Yeah, but I'm just
school.
saying, that does say something still. I mean, he is a shifty guy.
Right.
I just think we beat up on him too much for one. He was on Chicago, it was led by Trubisky and Nick Foles. Field starts at quarterback here, and I know what people are thinking, so elusive, some rush.
Well, it's not, but just back to that broken tackle stat. Let's not forget that those arm tackles are considered broken tackles.
Yeah, I know.
So that's
I know.
just as much an offensive line stat.
But if you look at his fantasy points per game, other than week 1 and week 3, I forgot week 9. 3 single.
But that's 3,
Yeah, 3. That's it. Whole season too. He played all.
Right.
He played everything.
Yeah, why are we disrespecting him?
Exactly.
Why are we beating him up so much? Same goes for the next guy on the list, the 21st ranked running back for Fantasy Bros. My 18th ranked running back, and that's Josh Jacobs. And Jacobs' stock, guys, has plummeted with the offseason addition of Kenyon Drake. But am I the only one not freaking out? I mean, I'll admit, at first it was kind of a gut punch for Jacobs' value, but I think Drake might be a concern for the receiving group more than for Jacobs. I mean, it's not like Jacobs gets targeted all that much to begin with. In fact, if you took away Jacobs' 33 receptions, let's just take them off the board like they never happened, he still would have finished as the RB14. Is that horrible with 0 receptions? What matters the most for Jacobs is that he is the goal line option for Las Vegas, finishing second in the league with 66 goal line carries. 11 of his 12 touchdowns were in the red zone among those goal line carries. He's going to carry that role in 2020. They're not going to move away from that. There's talk about the offensive line being in shambles. Well, let's not jump the gun. This is a new and younger offensive line. We don't really know what we have here, so I'm not willing to make that jump quite yet. I think there's also an overreaction to Coach Gruden, like his coach speak, kind of regarding the usage of Kenyon Drake. Yes, Drake's going to be used, but how many times have we heard used all over the field? And how many times has it amounted to more than just a spot start here and there in fantasy? There's a huge overreaction, I think, guys, with Jacobs. Drake is needed as a receiver. Vegas is in the top 8 in targets to the running back position, and that's where the Drake is going to make his hay. Vegas is also 11th in rush attempts, where Jacobs makes his hay. I see a similar backfield situation to, at worst, Sony Michel and James White in 2018, or what might be more likely, at best, Eckler and Gordon in 2019. Tom.
Oh, I think that Drake takes some carries away from him. I think Booker had 93 carries for this team last year. I could easily see 140 to 150 with Drake out there. He's a better back than Booker was last year. They brought him in. They paid him some money. They're going to use him. He's not going to be that gadget player like they say. They say that every year, these guys. And that he's just going to be a running back. But I think the Drake does hurt Jacobs a lot. I have him at 21, which is not bad.
I don't think it hurts him a lot. I really don't. And I see a similar output for Jacobs to what he saw last year, John. So I'll let you kind of be the tiebreaker. What do you think?
I think I have Jacobs ranked too low. I should have actually ranked higher, and this is why. Because after I read something the other night, I actually had to, I'm going to read it to you guys, but I have Josh Jacobs at 20. It's not disrespectful, but I think I should have him in a...
Well, have him,
no.
Yeah, I have him at 18, so it's not like I was
Yeah, I
way
think I
off.
should have
Where
him-
did you have him, Tom?
21.
21. It's not like we
Yeah.
were way off.
But here's the thing
each
about
other.
Josh Jacobs in 2020. He was one of 3 players to have 300 touches. He was number 13 in fantasy points per game, number 8 in total fantasy points, number 5 in yards created, number 4 in evaded tackles, number 4 in TDs, number 3 in broken tackles, number 3 in goal line touches, and number 2 in red zone touches.
I just think we're looking at it as if, oh, it's over for Jacobs.
It's not.
How many teams do we see use 2 running backs in both of? I mean, this could be Chubb in Hunt. Or I look at it as being closer to that than Kamara and Murray. I honestly do. I think it's going to be similar, and they run the ball a lot in Oakland. Las Vegas.
Yeah, no, and this line, like you said, yes, they did lose a lot of their line, but like you said, they're getting youth, so these guys are going to be there longer, and they did draft a couple offensive linemen. I don't think their line takes a huge hit here. I actually think it stays the same or gets better, because these guys are more athletic, like Richie
Incognito.
Didn't he move on from them? I
No,
believe,
he's.
too?
I
Or did
thought
he
was
stay?
still
They're
there.
going to re-sign him.
He was the one that actually stayed, and he's Pro Bowl caliber.
But they spent some pretty solid draft capital on offensive line. I mean, it's just, let's not assume their offensive line's going to stink when it's not like it was a top 5 offensive line last year. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I think
it was good.
But here's the thing, another thing that I guess people just look at the Raiders and then look at Jacobs that way, and that's no disrespect the Raiders fans, but his attempts went up, his yardage only went down by like 90.
He's used constantly on the goal line. Number 2 in the league.
Yes, his average went down, but his touchdowns went up, his targets went up.
I believe it was only Derrick Henry that got more goal line touches.
I believe it was.
Yes, it was, and his fantasy points per game went up, and he played more games, so,
All right.
I
Well,
think
so
it's
for
gonna
the
help
sa-
them.
For the sake of time, let's move on. I think we've definitely touched on Jacobs, and he's for certain, a polarizing figure in fantasy football this year with Kenyon Drake also in town. On a side note, I also think Kenyon Drake is ranked way too low. I think he's going to have a nice season. So moving on to next on the list, according to Fantasy Pros, number 22 ranked running back for them is Myles Gaskin. I have Myles Gaskin. I have him at 23. And we've been through free agency, we've been through the draft, and through all of that. And Myles Gaskin still sits atop the Dolphins depth chart, and I, for one, am a big fan of that. Selvin Ahmed may see a larger role between the tackles this year, but Gaskin has much more standalone value than him. He played in just 10 games, but averaged 4.7 targets and 14.2 carries per game, did Gaskin. That's a pretty solid workload, especially with the premium being on receptions in PPR, which is what we're ranking right now. Gaskin also finished with double-digit points in all but just one game and averaged 16.4 PPR points per game. That's more points per game than Josh Jacobs, Ezekiel Elliott, Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, Antonio Gibson, and Deandre Swift, to name a few. His 4.1 yards per carry is respectable. His 8.2 yards per target was better than Darren Waller, Chase Claypool, Tyler Lockett, Michael Thomas, Cooper Kupp. Want some more? Here's some running back yards per target. Austin Eckler, 6.2. Aaron Jones, 5.6. Kareem Hunt, 6.0. Alvin Kamara, 7.1. They all pale in comparison to Gaskin. My only concern is availability. I'm not projecting for it, but Gaskin has never played more than 10 games in his 2 seasons. With that being said, I'm not overly concerned. He's 5'10", 200 pounds, so he's not exactly tiny. I also expect enough of Ahmed that Gaskin won't get overexposed. So I'm excited, John, to hit the gas in 2021.
Yeah, let's not forget that Gaskin missed time because I believe he was on COVID protocol. I don't know if he had COVID, but he did miss a lot of games because of that. But the thing that opened my eyes, this guy saw 47 targets in 10 games, and that's with the other talent with him. Remember, like the first few games, they were big on Breida, but they started realizing that Burrito is not the future, that the Gaskin is. If you average over his average of targets, he would have finished, if he played a full game season, almost 80 targets. He finished with 41 receptions. That's amazing. So now you do that over 17 games. You're talking about 80 targets, probably 60, 70 receptions. Now you add the added carries they missed because of the games last year, 4.1 average. Everything goes up, and let's not forget, this defense has vastly improved, which means, what do you do to keep your defense fresh? You run the ball. I think he's going to be involved a lot more. I don't think he's got a lot of talent. Yes, Ahmed.
I think Tua's going to check down a ton, too.
Yeah, so I think Ahmed is going to, spell him here and there, but I think this is the Gaskin's job, and I say that because
The Gaskin, I like that.
they
That's pretty good.
they didn't sit here and draft the back. They believe in him, and I think he's going to rock it. I actually have him ranked at 19.
Oh, wow, you're a lot higher.
Yeah.
Tom, this seems like a guy that you would like.
I like these type of guys. I have a 19 as well. He's just a little guy, but he goes out there and runs the ball. He runs hard. He's like a Joe Morris back to the Giants in the 80s. He's a little guy, but he runs hard.
Yep. I mean, he's not that little. I mean, the guy's 200 pounds. It's not like he's
But compared
180, 170.
you could start comparing like Najee Harris.
But he can run low at 5'10", which is nice.
Yeah, and what are we going to compare him to Najee Harris?
No, I'm just saying, Najee Harris is huge.
All right. Moving on to number 23, according to Fantasy Pros, and I have this guy outside my top 24. I'll let you guys talk about him because a little bit later in the show I'll be talking about him, and that's Kareem Hunt. John, where are you at on Kareem?
I am at 21.
All right, talk to me about him.
I mean, Kareem Hunt, he finished a top 10 back last year. Yes, Nick Chubb had to go down. I get that, but still, he still put up 13.7 fantasy points per game. The biggest thing was, I mean, as bad as he didn't seem like he was running the ball, he still had 198 carries. So I see that progressing, but he still had a decent 4.2 average. He did not have a Nick Chubb average, but it was the amount of targets in the backfield. He still had 5 receiving touchdowns and 6 rushing. I think it'll be a little bit of regression on the rushing, but he is going to be involved here in Cleveland. They love to run the ball. They're not going to pound the ball into Nick Chubb and kill him either. They're going to split. They're going to keep both of them fresh. I think he still stays involved. I don't think he's going to see a top 10 this year, but he's definitely going to be involved in the passing game. He's definitely going to be involved to keep Chubb fresh. So I still think he's still worthy of keeping.
Tom, Kareem Hunt?
I don't have ranked. I just think this team runs so much better when Chubb is the main focus of their offense. He's a spot guy out there. He'll get his 8 to 10 touches a game, but this is Chubb's offense.
All right, I'll tell you guys what I think of Kareem Hunt in a little bit. But before then, we're going to move on to Fantasy Pros number 24th ranked running back, and then we'll talk about guys that we had top 24 that Fantasy Pros did not. As far as Fantasy Pros rounding out the top 24 is Chase Edmunds, and he's that other guy that I cheated with. He was my 24B to the 24A of Chris Carson. Much like Myles Gaskin's situation, Chase Edmunds is primed for a nice workload in 2021, even though you might not think in your mind that it makes sense. The difference is, I think, between Gaskin and Edmunds is that Gaskin has kind of already earned his workload, and Edmunds might still be in the process of doing so. Of course, Arizona also employs Benjamin, a 7th-round pick, and more notably signed James Conner, but neither guy commands too much attention to me. It's worth noting that Conner did achieve an RB6 finish just a few seasons ago, but since then he's been kind of holding together with duct tape and bubble gum. It's probably, I would say, Chase's job to lose, but I'm not as excited about him as I am Gaskin. I feel like Edmunds is better suited for the secondary role that he's been in, and I think he's better used in smaller doses. Just looking at his career, his workhorse sample size, it's kind of a mixed bag. In Week 7 of 2019, Edmunds had 27 carries for 126 yards, as well as 2 receptions for 24 yards, to go on with 3 touchdowns, which is outstanding. Then in Week 9 of 2020, against a bad Miami run D, he had 25 carries for 70 yards, 3 receptions for 18 yards, and 0 touchdowns. Not good at all. So I kind of pull an M&M here. Will the real Chase Edmunds please stand up? It's easy to say it's somewhere probably in between as far as where Edmunds will land and his productivity, but there's a lot of space in between those two outcomes. I'll give him this. He's got some moxie to go along with a chip on his shoulder. He's quoted as saying it's now or never, and that he's, quote, ready to run through a damn wall. I like that. And the opportunity is there. He's still a low-end RB2 for me, but he's got upside for much more, I think, Tom.
I got him at 26. Cliff Kingsbury loves him, but he didn't perform when he was the lead dog when Drake was out. He was a good running back, so he's a backup for me.
I think he's an interesting guy to go after. I think people are low on him right now. I think he's a value right now, John, but I do think he's one of those guys that's just better at being that second guy. You know what I mean? It's almost like Russell Gage is just best suited as a wide receiver 3 on a team. That's kind of what I think for Edmunds, but he could blow up.
Yeah, here's the thing. You know what kind of Edmunds reminds me of? Alexander Madison. Madison does better in that second role than he does in the first role. First role,
Yeah,
Madison
that's
tries.
fair.
Yeah, they don't take off when they have the opportunity, and that's what you want to see out of a lot of these second backs that should take over. So you can't base it on a 2-game sample size. I will defend them there. I don't have him ranked in my top 24, and why? I'm kind of scared of him. I'm not saying I'm not going to draft him, but he could explode. This is an Arizona offense that should get better this year. Kyler Murray's healthy. Kyler Murray being out there, a lot of people are going to think it hurts him. It helps him. Check downs, you're talking, opens up the run more. Hopkins there. I mean, this should help Edmonds. But that's who he reminds me of. He reminds me of Alexander Madison. Don't know if he will take that job, but there's that unknown. If he does, he could potentially turn into David Johnson that year he exploded.
Different type of player, but I'll be honest. I've always said that Chris Carson is a guy that's better suited with that smaller, secondary workload, and he's proved me wrong. And Chase Edmunds certainly can as well. But again, we're both all kind of in the same area as far as where he's ranked. So let's look outside of Fantasy Pros top 24. I'm not going to second guess myself because the guy's a workhorse back on a team I think that's going to run the ball an awful lot. I had Melvin Gordon, guys, ranked at 19, and Fantasy Pros had him much lower than that. And speaking of Melvin Gordon, I'm actually more concerned with Jamal Williams' effect on Gordon's fantasy outlook than I am with Drake's effect on Jacobs, but not right away. Gordon's 2020 season wasn't his best. He's 28 years old, started to show some signs of wear. but he did manage 4.6 yards per carry, which is actually the second best in his career. He also averaged 13.2 PPR points per game, which was the second lowest in his career. I don't want to beat up on Gordon too much because he did suffer from kind of pretty horrible quarterback play, mostly Drew Lock. Lock had the worst completion percentage in the league at 35th, ranked 32nd in QB rating, 26th in yards per pass thrown, even though he had a 92-yard completion mixed in there. And he was number 1 in interceptions. He's just absolutely dreadful, is Lock. And Denver in no way can put this guy out there week 1. Teddy Bridgewater isn't great, but I think he's a huge step up. And Mike Davis, who isn't half the back that Gordon is, in my opinion, saw an RB12 finish in 2020 with Teddy at the helm. With Bridgewater, Gordon, I think will do just fine for you. We can only dream of what would happen if Aaron Rodgers lands in Denver. Williams will probably cut in the workload of Gordon, down the stretch before long. But this team wants to run the ball, and there's going to be enough meat on the bone for the two of them. And I think Gordon maintains the lead role. Don't move on from Gordon just yet. I think 2022 is a different story, but I think he'll be fine this year. Tom, what do you think?
Oh, I have him at 20. I still think he's going to get the workload. Williams will
So
be
you're just one spot behind me.
He's going to get the touchdowns in the red zone, if they can get in the red zone.
What do you think, John?
I don't have him ranked in my top 24. I still think I'm a firm believer that Jamal Williams is going to cut into his workload more than people think. And could I be completely wrong? Yes, but
Who are you drafting first out of the two of them?
I would rather have Williams for the upside.
I'd rather have Gordon.
Gordon will be a 5th rounder, Williams will probably be a 10th or 11th, so the value is better in Williams.
If it shakes out that way.
Yeah.
Height does strange things to people, guys.
It does,
Especially
it does.
Once draft season, comes around.
But here's the also perspective you look at though too. Denver.
I don't disagree with that. I think at the end of the season, Williams is going to have a really good work.
Yeah, Denver took this kid where they did and didn't wait for a back later on. So that's the thing. They want a good back.
And don't forget though, Denver never goes with just one guy. They didn't do it until they got Gordon.
But they didn't just sit there and draft him in the second round. They could have went for a 4th round back. So the reason they went for the second round, and Gordon, what did you say, 28?
Yeah, 27, 28.
Yeah, he's not old, but here's the thing. They're probably also thinking in the back of their mind, is he worth this salary anymore? By your stats, he is. I guess, undersold him, but...
I just see, yeah, and so again, I think he's another one of those guys like Josh Jacobs that people are just kind of, you're on one complete side or the other. He's very polarizing. Tom, do you have anything else on him?
No.
Okay, I have Travis Etienne at 21. I don't understand why Fantasy Pros is not as high on him. I'm going to make this super simple. Listen to what I say here. The game is changing. And recently we've seen a new prototype emerge from the backfield. You guys know the one. I'm going to call it the slash back. The running back that's just as much a receiver as they are a running back. The guys that get less than 200 carries but still get it done. You want some examples? Alvin Kamara, 12 carries, 7 targets a game. Austin Eckler, 11.6 carries, 6.5 targets a game. Kareem Hunt, 12.3 carries, 3 targets a game. This style of player is becoming more and more prevalent, and relevant, and critical in today's NFL. So tell me, why is everyone freaking out when Travis Etienne, is taking all these receiving reps in camp? Why is everyone freaking out when Coach Saban wants to use him as a 3rd down specialist? We're nervous about James Robinson? Sure, he's going to get usage, but I see Etienne as a continuation of that slashback evolution, Tom. Heck, he's even the same size as Kamara. Both are 5'10", 215. I could see him as a Kamara.
I got Robinson and Etienne back-to-back. I think they're going to be almost like the Hunt and Chubb type of role. I think they're going to get a ton of carries. They're going to save Lawrence early in the season. They're going to see both these guys get a bunch of carries, bunch of receptions, just to protect Lawrence.
Yep. What do you think, John? Where do you have
I have
Etienne?
Etienne at 23. I'm a firm believer in the news of him. Oh, he might line up at wide receiver. That's great news.
That's a good thing.
That's great news. You're talking possibly 100 targets here from a guy who plays, like I said, he could be the 1B here, or he could be the 1A, and Robinson be the 1B. I do agree with Tom that I think this team's going to try to run more. Yes, they have Lawrence, but they don't want to rush him. They don't want to see him drown, so they're gonna run the ball a little bit here. And you look at Urban Meyer. He ran the ball quite a bit. in college, and he's the new head coach. And I'm not saying they're gonna be a run-heavy team, but they're gonna mix it in.
I have, and Tom mentioned, he alluded to Chubb and Hunt. I actually have this situation, ETN and Robinson, as more like Kamara and Latavius.
Yeah, I kinda see it that way, but
Which isn't too far off.
Yeah.
No,
But when they said they were gonna use him as a receiver, I was like, great, that's awesome. I mean, that's just more targets.
Yeah, no doubt.
You could see what, 75 to 80, even possibly 100 targets, depending on how they use him. I think it's great news. He's at 23. Look what he thinks. I know he's a college prospect, and people are like, oh, but there's a reason he's being drafted that high. He was the best pass catching back prospect to come out. And so they're going to use him that way. They're going to use him for his hands. That's not a bad thing. They're using his best.
That's what
it's
you
a great
want
thing.
now.
It's-
That's what you want.
Most coaches do not utilize.
When did we forget that's what you want out of your running?
Exactly, but it's just not that. When in college, in coaches, we always see it in the NFL a lot. They don't utilize the way they should be used. You know what I'm saying? Like a Lamar Jackson is used right. We've seen running backs and quarterbacks not used right, like to their, the offenses and fit around in their scheme.
I think
in this sense, ETN is just going to be, he's going to mold them in.
They each get 10 to 12 carries, I think. But I think ETN is going to be looking at 5 to 7 targets a game, and I think Robinson's only going to see a couple. So I think that's going to be the difference maker there. John, do you have anybody ranked in the top 24 that Fantasy Pros does not?
I
I don't think you do.
don't think I do either.
What about you, Tom? I can always count on you.
I got Leonard Fournette.
Okay.
I have an 18. When the Buccaneers got in the playoffs, they gave him the ball a lot. They were winning. He was scoring touchdowns. They call him what? Playoff Lenny or something like that.
I think Lombardi.
Lenny after they won the
Yeah.
Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I think they're going to give him the lead role next year. Ronald Jones would be a nice number 2, but they were rolling so good with him in that backfield in the playoffs and the Super Bowl. I think it's his job. He is so underrated. He was what, 30, 32 with rankings?
Number 4 pick in the draft, I think.
Top 4 pick 5 years ago. He's still got tread on the wheels.
Yep, I like him too. I don't have him in my top 24, but he's right on that outskirts there. What do you think of him, John?
Leonard Fournette, last year I couldn't get him or Ronald Jones right in my dynasty. I'm not saying he's not going to be used.
There'll be some maddening weeks.
Yeah, so the thing with me, I don't have him
Not
ranked.
John Madden.
I'm not saying Leonard Fournette's not a good player.
You got him ranked, but not in your top.
But not in my top 24. It's just that, here's the thing, there's all these backs there. Who's going to be the back which week? And here's the thing, maybe Arians gives Fournette, doesn't have him start less workload, keep him fresh, keep these guys fresh. That's what scares me as the coach. He might give Leonard Fournette the game 20 times one game and then give it to Jones the next game. Why? He doesn't want these guys to get injured, keep a fresh back. And look what they did down the stretch because these backs were fresh. That's kind of what's in the back of my mind. What's going to be his usage? How is it going to be his usage?
I'm with Tom. I think he's underrated. I could see him finishing in the top 24 for sure. Just don't have him ranked there right now. All right, question of the day, guys. This is a two-parter. And this week's question, part 1, is which running back got disrespected most by Fantasy Pros rankings? And I'm going to go with David Johnson. Right now he's ranked at 30th. And I get that Houston added Mark Ingram and Phillip Lindsay. I'm not too worried about either of those guys. They'll get work, but this team is going to have to play from behind a lot. And David Johnson is by far the best pass catcher of the 3. He might be the second best pass catcher on the entire team behind Brandon Cooks. But if Tyrod Taylor's under center, I'm not as pumped for Cooks' outlook. I think David Johnson stays the same. Let's hope for fantasy's sake that Watson is cleared and in the game. After all, he did target DJ around 4 times a game last year, and he's probably going to target him more with the loss of Will Fuller, although don't sleep on Nico Collins. Say what you will about David Johnson, but he did average over 15 PPR points per game last season and finished as the RB21, even though he missed 4 games. In fact, he was on pace for an RB7 finish. I'm not ready to abandon DJ quite yet. It looks like Fantasy Pros is. Tom, what do you expect for David Johnson?
I don't see much. This team's just so disarray right now. If Watson's out, who's the quarterback? Is it Tyrod Taylor? Is it Finley? Is it the rookie they just drafted? This offense is just... I stay away from all of them right
But
now.
you could get him as your RB4.
That's about 30, 35 on the list.
What are you thinking on David Johnson, John? Do you think Fantasy Pros disrespect him or not?
I think in some ways they did, but I think they're also based it on this is a different offense when Deshaun Watson's there. So I think they're taking, I don't know if it was
Yeah.
part of their rankings, but
Yeah.
I think that's what they're doing here. Yeah, they didn't disrespect him because they're based on Deshaun Watson not being there this year. Most of us are.
He could see over 5 targets a game though.
Yeah, and I
That's
think,
worth noting.
and he still could, even with Tyrod Taylor or
Yeah.
any of the other quarterbacks, that's the thing, but I think the first instinct from a lot of analysts is, oh, Deshaun Watson out there, so his value just drops, but that's probably one reason he got disrespected, and like you said, 15 points per game, that's amazing.
Pretty darn good. Tom,
Yeah.
who did you think got disrespected?
I had
most?
Fournette, they had him way down on the list at 31, I have him at 18, just for the fact we said earlier.
I do agree with that. 31's too low for a guy that, he's an RB1 on his team, and granted, it might be a 60-40 split, but he's gonna have weeks where he's a top 5 running back. He's on a team with really good offense that's gonna control the pace of the game a lot, so I agree with you there. What do you think, well, you already kinda said what you thought
Yeah.
on that. John, who do you think Fantasy Pros has disrespected, too much thus far in their rankings?
I think, no, wait, who did you disrespect? Oh, in my rankings.
Oh, no. Who do you think Fantasy Pros disrespected most in their
Okay.
rankings?
So I think that,
Do you have a long day today?
yeah, very long day.
They're all long for John.
I honestly think that Ronald Jones was actually disrespected. He finished in the top 20 last year as a top 20 back, believe it or not. And I don't think he's getting the credit he deserves.
I just don't think Jones is that good.
He was 32 on the list, right behind Fournette.
Right.
You know, he's 20 on the list. This is last year's stats.
No, he's talking about this year's rankings.
Yeah, I think they have him too low, but I get why
Is
you
this
would.
one too much for you, John?
But you also gotta remember, this team also added Giovanni Bernard. Brady loves pass catching backs. It's not Keyshawn Vaughn, guys. I don't care what Bruce
I
Arians
don't
is saying.
want to fight around.
But Ronald Jones, I don't want the backs, but I think he got disrespected for it. He can break them up, and he averaged 5.1 a game. He just missed 1,000 yards and less than 200 carries.
Okay, good point. Part 2, listen closely, John.
Okay.
Who did you disrespect most in your rankings? And I went with Kareem Hunt on this. I had Hunt at 26. Fantasy Pros has him, I think we talked about 23. And I know I'll likely adjust that. Part of the problem is that not much separates Hunt, Johnson, Edmunds, Carson, and Mike Davis, those guys. There's not much separation between them. And truthfully, I do really like Hunt. He's averaged between 12.7 and 20.9 PPR points per game in his career. And Cleveland runs the 4th most run plays per game. So he and Chubb should get both plenty of work, with Hunt receiving most of the receiving work, and Chubb obviously getting most of the rushing work. Hunt also finished 7th among all running backs in touchdowns with 11 last year. He finished 7th in evaded tackles, 7th in yards created, 6th in yards created per touch. My only concern with Hunt is that I don't project him to be a week-to-week starter. He had 7 games with single-digit PPR finishes. Chubb didn't play in 2 of those games, and they were still single digits in those 2. Hunt also finished 22nd amongst running backs in quality starts. So he has some interesting splits also. He averaged 13.6 PPR points per game in games that Nick Chubb played. And in the 4 games that Nick Chubb was out, he averaged, guess what? 13.6, with the same exact amount. It was the first and second half splits that were concerning. In Hunt's first 8 games, he averaged 15.5 points per game. And in his last 8, it was just 11.7. And there was a 29-point game mixed in the last 8 games there. So it looks like he kind of burned out down the stretch. He did miss practice time due to a rib injury in week 8 also. I think it's worth noting. Plus, Chubb came fresh off his injury in week 10. So Cleveland might have definitely been managing Hunt's workload. At the end of the day, though, he's always been a good fantasy option. I'm just nervous about his consistency. So I probably disrespected him a little bit. Tom, who did you disrespect most in yours?
Edwards-Helaire. I just don't trust that offense in the running game. Even with Bellay last year, they didn't run the ball at all at the end of the season. They threw quick, they threw deep, they threw the ball a ton. It was all completions, all touchdowns. This offense is pass-oriented.
John, what about you?
Mine's easy. Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones was ranked by Fantasy Pros at number 9. I disrespected him by putting him at 15. That's how I did it. Yeah, that's pretty darn disrespectful.
Where'd you have him? Tom, I know you went on.
I have Jones at 10.
Okay.
Yeah, I disrespect
Definitely
him.
the low man on it. Well, if you wanna hear us disrespect each other, we typically do it twice a week here at the Working Class Podcast. So you are listening to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast, and I just wanna thank you, the listener, for supporting the Working Class Podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and Verbal. And if you want to reach out to us, the Blue Collar Ballers, you can do so at armchairf@gmail.com. And you can connect with us on Facebook at Armchair Fantasy Football and Instagram at Armchair_Fantasy_Football. Until next time, guys. You guys excited for next week's show? I think we've got another mock draft. Let me take a look at this. Hold, please. Oh, that's the wrong document. It's always so
One thing I actually.
clean and fresh when we're all three together.
When you are actually looking it up, I am excited for this.
That is mock draft version 2, guys.
Ooh, sweet. I am actually looking forward to this Sunday, our little fantasy festivities. So
Yeah, we
I
got
can't wait for that.
a lot going on.
And we actually have a little.
We've got draft raffle, we've got fantasy football trivia where you can earn an extra draft pick between rounds 1 and 8, I think it is. We've got the tag cathlon and the tag team league where it's some physical activity, not too physical though, guys. Not too much. We don't have to do any Najee Harris jumping over.
We're not doing 40s and.
No 40s or anything like that. No,
Maybe a
no,
40, a Colt 45.
Yeah, Rich Eisen can handle that. Yeah, what else do? We pick divisions, so the division, there's 2 champions per league, Roto and Playoff, and they pick divisions. So that's a lot of cool stuff. Some autos pizza represent. So yeah, we're looking forward to that.
Can't wait. So.
Can't wait. So yeah, and anyway, we'll talk to you guys when we do a mock draft. I can't talk today.
Mock draft
man.
version 2.
I just can't talk today. I had a procedure yesterday. They put a wire in my brain. Everything's great, by the way, but maybe that set me off a little bit. So I'm going to stop speaking gibberish to you guys, and hopefully I'll clean that stuff up by next week. So thanks for listening.
We'll see you guys.
See ya.
Yeah.